She was not born into the kind of world that invites you through golden gates. She was born into the kind of world that teaches you to press your uniform before the first day of work, to hold your spine straight on a British Airways flight, while serving tea to people who would never learn your name. She was born Carole Goldsmith in Perivale, West London, daughter of a man who worked hard and a woman the family quietly called Lady Dorothy, not because Dorothy had a title, but because she carried one in her chest whether anyone gave it to her or not. And somewhere between that small house in Southall and the gravel drive of Buckingham Palace, a story unfolded that nobody could have predicted. Not the tabloids, not the courtiers, not even Carole herself, if she is being completely honest. But here is what is true. Here is what makes this story worth telling. There was a morning, a real morning, somewhere in the early years after Carole's daughter Kate began spending serious time in the orbit of Prince William, when Carole arrived near a palace gate, and the guard on duty did not know who she was. The world had not yet caught up to the fact that this woman, this flight attendant turned businesswoman, this mother of three from Berkshire, was about to become one of the most important people in the life of a future king. She stood there, practical and composed, and the system that exists to keep ordinary people out did what systems always do. It hesitated. It questioned. It prepared to say no. And then a guard spoke up. That moment lasted less than a minute in real time. In terms of what it meant, what it said about class and grit and the peculiar grinding climb that Carole Middleton made over decades, it lasted a lifetime. This is that story. There are women who walk into rooms and announce themselves. Carole Middleton was never one of those women. She walked into rooms and got to work. She was born on the 31st of January, 1955, in the borough of Ealing, London, in a neighborhood called Perivale. Her mother, Dorothy, whom the extended family called Lady Dorothy in that half-affectionate, half-exasperated way families do with women who have standards they refuse to lower, was the daughter of a coal miner. Her father, Ronald, was a quiet man who adored his wife and did what was asked of him without complaint. They were not wealthy people. They were not connected people. They were people who understood that you built a life through what you were willing to do when no one was watching, and they passed that understanding down to Carole the way other families passed down silverware. Carole grew up in Southall. She attended Featherstone High School. She was not the girl who dreamed of palaces or princes. She was the girl who got her certificates, put on a uniform, and walked through the doors of British Airways with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from a mother who taught you that wanting better is not the same as being ashamed of where you came from. She became a flight attendant. The sky was quite literally the first ceiling she broke through, and she did it at 30,000 feet. It was in those corridors of British Airways that she met Michael Middleton. He was a flight dispatcher, steady and measured, a man from a family that had been well-connected for generations. His lineage tangled up with Yorkshire solicitors and aristocratic cousins and a grandmother named Olive who had nursed alongside royalty during wartime. Michael Middleton's world was several rungs above Carole Goldsmith's on the ladder that Britain still pretends doesn't exist. She married him on the 21st of June, 1980, at the Church of St. James in Dorney, Buckinghamshire, and from that day forward, she never stopped building. They bought a Victorian house in Bradfield, Southend. They had 3 children, Catherine in 1982, Philippa in 1983, James in 1987. In 1984, they moved the young family briefly to Jordan, where Michael worked, before returning to West Berkshire in 1986. The children grew up with 2 parents who showed up. That sounds simple. In a world where showing up is quietly the rarest thing, it was extraordinary. In 1987, Carole started Party Pieces. She did it at the kitchen table. She made party bags and wrote a leaflet about it and distributed those leaflets around the local area by hand, the way women who understand the value of a thing do it, without waiting for permission, without a business loan, without a logo designed by someone expensive. She made something from nothing, which is, when you strip away all the noise, the truest definition of ambition that exists. Within 2 years, Michael had left British Airways to join her. By 1995, the business had grown large enough that they needed a proper headquarters, and they moved operations to a set of farm buildings at a Schampstead Common. Party pieces would eventually be estimated to be worth 30 million pounds. She was building a life that by every visible measure had nothing to do with palaces or guards or gates. And then her daughter went to university. Carole Middleton arrived at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland in 2001. Prince William arrived there the same year. There is a story, reported in royal biographies, amplified by Netflix, that Carole had encouraged Kate to delay her university place by a year, a so-called gap year, so that her time at St. Andrews would coincide with William's. Carole has never confirmed this. She has also never particularly denied it. What she has consistently done, in the way she does everything, is simply kept moving. The tabloids wanted a villain. What they got was a woman who made decisions that turned out to be correct. William and Kate met. They became friends. Friendship deepened into something that William, when he and Kate were eventually engaged and sitting before cameras in 2010, described by saying the Middletons had been really loving and caring and really fun, and that he felt really a part of the family. The future King of England felt at home in Carole's house. That tells you everything about Carole that the tabloids spent years trying to erase. But the road to that engagement was not smooth. It was not a straight line. And before Carole Middleton became the woman who whizzed through the golden gates of Kensington Palace in her Land Rover, recognized by every guard on the premises, welcomed into every room, before all of that, there was a version of Carole Middleton who stood on the outside of those gates and had to prove she belonged. The early years of Kate and William's relationship put Carole in a position that no etiquette manual covers. She was the mother of the girl who might, if the universe cooperated, become the wife of the heir to the British throne. That relationship required a specific and entirely unwritten navigation. The royal world does not warm to outsiders instantly. It does not clap you on the shoulder and say welcome. It watches. It evaluates. It asks questions that it never actually asks out loud, preferring instead to communicate through the temperature of a room, the placement of a chair, the number of seconds before someone makes eye contact. Carole walked into that world carrying the particular burden of a woman who has climbed, which is that the people who are already there will always be able to calculate how far you've come. The press had given her a nickname, Doors to Manual, a reference to her time as a flight attendant, deployed as an insult, an attempt to remind everyone that she was working class and had no business near the royal circle. The tabloids who spent their evenings photographing celebrities leaving clubs had decided that a woman who started a mail-order party business from her kitchen table was somehow a figure of mockery. Britain's class system is a thing that works in both directions. It will shut you out if you are too poor, and it will punish you publicly if you try to get in. Carole kept moving. She attended the events she was invited to. She dressed appropriately. She was warm and practical and unflappable. Those are the words that people who knew her used again and again without any visible coordination. She was, by every account, exactly what she appeared to be, a woman who loved her daughter, who took nothing for granted, and who was willing to do whatever was required to support her family without making it about herself. But the palace gates were not always open to her. Not yet. There was a specific kind of morning, the kind that arrives in London in late autumn, gray and cold, the kind of morning where the city feels like it is testing you, when Carole arrived at a Kensington Palace entrance. Kate was inside. The children were there, or would be soon. Carole had come the way she always came, the way she would later be described as coming, practical, purposeful, in her Land Rover, not dressed for cameras, dressed for the job she had actually come to do. The guard at the entrance did not recognize her. This was early enough in the relationship between Carole and the palace that everybody knowing her had not yet happened. She was the girlfriend's mother. She was the woman the tabloids were calling Doors to Manual. She was, as far as the formal machinery of royal security was concerned, a member of the public. She said who she was. The guard looked at her with the expression that trained professionals use when they're applying a protocol, and the protocol requires them to wait. Security works on credentials, on lists, on confirmation. Carole's name may or may not have been on the right list that morning. What mattered was the pause. What mattered was the gate that had not opened yet. She waited, not because she was unsure of herself. She waited because she understood, with the particular intelligence of a woman who had navigated British class distinctions for most of her adult life, that making a scene was not the move. Patience was the move. Composure was the move. And then, from somewhere nearby, another voice spoke. A guard who knew. A guard who had seen her before, or had been briefed, or had simply done his job well enough to know who belonged near that gate on that morning. He spoke up. He confirmed her. He addressed the hesitation with the kind of quiet authority that military bearing produces, and in doing so, he did something that Carole would never need anyone to do for her again. The gate opened. She drove through. She went inside and helped with the children and did the 100 small things that she always did and never asked anyone to notice. The world kept turning. Kate and William kept moving toward the future that was waiting for them. But that moment at the gate, that small, quiet, entirely undramatic moment, was a line in the sand. Before it, Carole Middleton was a woman trying to get in. After it, the process of becoming someone who was simply assumed to belong had begun. It did not happen overnight. It happened the way all real things happen, through repetition and time and showing up over and over until the question of whether you belong stops being a question at all. She was not born into the world behind those gates. She built her way to it. And on one gray London morning, a guard with a good memory and a sense of his own job helped her through a door that was already, whether the tabloids wanted to admit it or not, always going to be hers. The British press has always had a particular appetite for women who climb. Not the climbing itself. The climbing is tolerated, occasionally celebrated, but the woman who does it without performing the right amount of apology while she does it. Carole Middleton never apologized for who she was or where she came from, and that, more than anything, is what the tabloids could not stand. By the mid-2000s, when it had become clear that Kate Middleton and Prince William were not a university romance that would fade quietly after graduation, the attention on Carole had sharpened into something that was less like curiosity and more like surveillance. Every time Carole appeared at a public event, at the polo, at a race meeting, at any occasion where she was photographed near royalty, the cameras found her. Every outfit was assessed. Every expression was analyzed. The nickname Doors to Manual had been floating in the tabloid ecosystem since at least 2006, a small and mean thing designed to remind readers that Carole had once pushed a service trolley down an aircraft aisle, and that this should disqualify her from being taken seriously in rooms where people wore white gloves. It did not work. It did not work because Carole Middleton is the kind of woman who understands the difference between what people say about you and what you actually are. What she actually was during those years was irreplaceable. Think about what those years required from her. Kate and William broke up in April 2007. It was tabloid fuel of the highest grade. The future king had ended it. The ambitious mother's grand plan had apparently unraveled, and commentators who had been waiting for this moment leaned into their typewriters with visible satisfaction. And what did Carole do? She gave her daughter the advice that every royal biographer who has since touched this story repeats, because it is so perfectly calibrated that it sounds like something you would find in a book you would actually read. Don't sit at home crying. Get a spray tan. Go out. Let him see what he's missing. Kate did exactly that. It worked. That is not the advice of a social climber in the cartoonish sense the tabloids enjoyed. That is the advice of a woman who understood human nature, who understood her daughter, who understood that grief metabolized into action is healthier than grief metabolized into waiting, and who happened to also understand, because she was not naive about the world she was now operating in. That visibility is its own kind of language. Carole Middleton did not push her daughter toward Prince. She taught her daughter to value herself. The prince followed. William and Kate reunited later in 2007. By 2008 and 2009, the relationship had the kind of settled gravity around it that precedes announcements. People in the palace's wider orbit began to understand that the Middletons were not a temporary presence. They were structural. They were the kind of family that the future heir to the throne called when he needed to feel like a person instead of a title. The warmth of Carole's house, the normalcy of her kitchen, the particular gift she had for making people feel welcome without making a production of it. These things were not incidental to William and Kate's relationship. They were, according to those close to the couple, foundational to it. But the palace world processes things slowly. The royal household at that time, the late 2000s, the years between reunion and engagement, was still in the process of calibrating exactly what the Middletons were and what they were not. There were courtiers who were fine with it. There were others who maintained the particular coldness of people who believe that the borders of acceptable society are fixed and that crossing should be approved by committee. Carole was not from a landed family. She was not from an old name. She was from Southall, and she had worked in service, and however many millions party pieces had generated, there were people inside the palace gates who felt that the source of money mattered as much as the amount. None of this was said directly. It almost never is in England. It was communicated through the texture of interactions, through where Carole was placed at events, through which room she was welcomed into, and which were left subtly off the tour. She was never humiliated. The royal world is too practiced for crude gestures. But she was assessed repeatedly and carefully in a way that anyone who did not arrive pre-approved gets assessed in that world. Carole passed every assessment. She passed them because she was exactly what she appeared to be, which is rarer in that world than it sounds. She was not performing warmth while secretly calculating. She was not dressing up class anxiety in cashmere and calling it elegance. She was a woman who had raised 3 children while building a business from scratch, who had been married to the same man for more than 2 decades, who arrived at family occasions with food she had made and left after the washing up was done. Royal advisors and biographers who have spoken on the record about Carole in later years used words like practical and unflappable and indispensable in combinations that suggest not one of them was using a thesaurus. They were reporting something they had actually seen. The engagement came in November 2010. William proposed to Kate in Kenya, using the sapphire ring that had belonged to Diana. The world reacted the way the world reacts to royal engagements, with a joy that is partly genuine and partly the performance of a shared cultural script. The Middleton family reacted with the kind of quiet dignity that had by then become their signature. Carole and Michael released a statement that said what needed to be said and no more. There was no interview where Carole positioned herself, no glossy magazine spread, no moment where she appeared to be enjoying her proximity to the royal circle in a way designed to be observed. There's a detail from this period that tells you a great deal about how carefully Carole had to navigate things even as she was being welcomed. When Kate and William were married in April 2011 at Westminster Abbey, it was one of the most watched events in television history. Carole was there, of course, mother of the bride, dressed beautifully, composed in a way that only people who have spent years preparing for moments they always knew were coming could be composed. But there is an account, sourced from Giles Brandreth's biography of Queen Elizabeth, that Carole had put forward a list of people she hoped might attend the post-wedding reception at Buckingham Palace. None of them made the cut. The palace had its own list and its own geometry, and Carole's additions did not fit inside it. She found another way. She hosted separate events, sidebar occasions where her own guests could celebrate. And she did it without complaint, without a publicist, without a word to the press. That is a particular kind of grace. It is the grace of someone who understands the rules of a game that was designed without her in mind and plays within them anyway, not because she is diminished by them, but because she is focused on the long game, and the long game is what she has always been playing. After the wedding, things changed. They did not change all at once. They changed the way things change when you have been doing the right thing consistently enough that the world eventually catches up to you. The Middletons were invited to the Diamond Jubilee Thames River pageant in 2012. They were at the 2013 Coronation Festival at Buckingham Palace. Carole was photographed being driven by Queen Elizabeth herself in Scotland. She and Michael were welcomed at Burke Hall on the Balmoral estate by King Charles. These are not small things. These are the kinds of invitations that signal a shift in how an institution categorizes you. You do not get driven around a Scottish estate by the Queen of England because you are the mother of a daughter who married well. You get driven around a Scottish estate by the Queen of England because the Queen of England has decided that you are someone worth having in a car. And through all of it, the access growing, the gates opening more easily, the guards who now all knew her name. Carole never changed the behavior that had gotten her there. She kept being the woman who turned up to help with bedtime and bath time. She kept filling the freezer with the grandchildren's favorite foods. She kept doing the school run. She kept arriving quietly and without announcement and getting on with it. Royal commentator and author Katie Nicholl would later say on a documentary that one of the things that allowed William and Kate to provide a normal life for their children was specifically the presence of the Middletons. She described Carole as a regular through those golden gates at Kensington Palace, adding that she whizzes through in her Land Rover and that there is no security because everybody knows her. Read that sentence again. There's no security because everybody knows her. That sentence describes a journey of more than 2 decades. It describes the distance between a woman who once sat at the outside of those gates while a guard's hand hovered over a phone waiting for confirmation, and a woman who is so woven into the fabric of the place that the question of whether she belongs has become as absurd as asking whether the walls belong. But the journey had not been without its real tests. And the one that came in 2023 and 2024 was the kind that no amount of preparation or grace or practical wisdom can make easy, because it was not about class or access or protocol. It was about her daughter's life. When Kate Middleton underwent abdominal surgery in January 2024, and when the weeks that followed became a period of confusion and speculation and an internet that collectively refused to leave the Princess of Wales alone, Carole Middleton did what she had always done. She showed up. She drove Kate in Windsor. The photograph that marked the first public sighting of Kate after surgery was a photograph of her in a car with her mother. Carole was at the wheel. She was always at the wheel in the literal and figurative sense when her daughter needed steadying. The tabloids that had once called her doors to manual were now writing about her as the anchor of the family. The woman who had been photographed at polo matches and evaluated for her hemlines was now being called, without irony, the most important person in the Princess of Wales's recovery. Experts on royal matters spoke about her with a respect that had none of the hesitation of those early years. The word that keeps coming back to me is strength, one royal commentator said. Strength, not ambition, not social climbing, not a woman who chewed gum at the Royal Albert Hall, which some royal correspondent once genuinely printed in a national newspaper. Strength. The reframing had taken the better part of 30 years. Carole Middleton had outlasted every unflattering narrative the British press had built around her. She had done it not by fighting back, not by giving interviews correcting the record, not by positioning herself, but by continuing to be exactly who she was reliably and without apology until the gap between who she was and who they said she was became too wide for anyone to take seriously. She had walked through the gates, and she had kept walking, and eventually the gates had stopped being the subject of the story. She was the story, the thing she had built, the family she had held together, the daughter she had raised, the marriage she had modeled, the grandchildren she helped raise, the decades of quiet and ferocious love. That was the story. The guard at the gate had spoken up for her once, on one gray morning, and let her through. She had done the rest herself. There's a thing that happens to a woman when she has been underestimated long enough. It is not bitterness, exactly. It is something closer to a quiet internal rearrangement, a decision, made without ceremony, to stop consulting external opinion about her own worth and to simply proceed. Carole Middleton appears to have made that rearrangement somewhere in the early 2000s and never looked back. By the time her grandson, Prince George, was born on the 22nd of July, 2013, Carole Middleton was the kind of grandmother who did not need to ask what she should do. She already knew. She arrived. She cooked. She held the baby so the parents could sleep. She did not post about it. She did not give an interview about how moved she had been. She moved through that period the way she had moved through every period, like a woman who has identified what is actually needed and has no interest in being thanked for providing it. That is an uncommon quality. In a world that increasingly confuses the documentation of doing something with the doing of it, Carole Middleton had always belonged to the older tradition, the one that measures love by its output rather than its visibility. Her daughter Kate was learning to be a princess in real time, under the scrutiny of a global press apparatus that judged every haircut and every hemline and every canceled engagement, and Carole was the thing at the center of all of it that didn't move. Michael, too, steady and quiet at her side, the kind of man who shows up at Royal Ascot in the right morning suit and does not require recognition for it. But it was Carole whose energy defined the Middleton contribution to the Wales household. It was Carole who had internalized, decades earlier, that a family is not a thing that maintains itself, and that the work of holding people together is the most serious work there is. When Princess Charlotte was born in 2015 and Prince Louis in 2018, Carole was already a known entity inside the palace world in a way that bore no resemblance to those early years. The gate hesitations were ancient history. The guard who had spoken up for her had done his small service and moved on, completely unaware, almost certainly, of the scene he had been a minor participant in. The question of whether Carole belonged in the space between those stone walls had been settled so decisively that raising it again would have seemed bizarre to everyone currently opening doors for her. She was by then a woman with a specific and recognized role that no title captured. She was not a lady. She was not a duchess. She had no position in the formal hierarchy of the royal household. What she had was something the formal hierarchy cannot manufacture. She was the person the future Princess of Wales called first. She was the person William described as making him feel like a part of the family at a time when he had lost his own mother, and the concept of family had been, for him, both elevated and fractured. She was the woman who had been driving the wagon, as one royal expert put it, with a rifle at her feet and 3 children in the back, for so long that the destination had eventually arrived to meet her. There's a specific image from June 2024 that sits inside this story and belongs there. It was at Royal Ascot, one of the great ceremonies of the English social calendar, held at the Berkshire Racecourse that is less than an hour from the Middleton home. Kate was not there. She was still moving carefully through her recovery from cancer treatment, and her absence was noted with the kind of tender concern that had replaced the snark of previous years. Carole was there. Michael was there. And at some point in the afternoon, Carole's heels sank into the soft turf of the parade ring, as heels do on English grass in June, and the person who reached over to take her hand while she freed the shoe was Prince William. The photographs captured it. The Prince of Wales, hands full with the obligations of being what he is, took a moment to hold his mother-in-law's hand while she laughed at herself in a pale blue self-portrait dress on a summer afternoon. They were both laughing. It is the kind of image that tells you, at a glance, more about a relationship than 100 words could. This is not a man tolerating his mother-in-law. This is a man who is fond of his mother-in-law, genuinely and visibly, in a way that people are fond of the people who helped make them who they are. Royal biographers and commentators have been saying some version of the same thing for years. That William trusts Carole, that he relies on her, that the particular structure of the Wales household, the groundedness of it, the capacity of 2 people who live under extraordinary pressure to remain present parents and functioning human beings, owes something significant to the Middleton presence. Katie Nicholl, whose reporting on the Wales family has been consistent and considered, put it plainly, what allows William and Kate to provide an ordinary life for their children is the Middletons. Not a staff member, not a palace official, her mother. The same year that Carole held Kate's hand through chemotherapy, she was at Kensington Palace for a video that Kate recorded for the public, the one in September 2024 in which Kate, thin and tired and luminously herself, announced that she had completed treatment. The family played cards around a table. Kate, William, the three children, Carole, and Michael. The image was not staged with the grim efficiency of a public relations exercise. It looked like a family, recognizably and simply a family, sitting together in the late afternoon light because they had gotten through something hard and there was still joy to be found if you sat down long enough to look for it. Carole was in that image the way she is in all of it. Present, unremarkable to look at in the sense that she has never required the picture to be about her. Fundamental in the way that things which have always been there become invisible until you look for them. Party Pieces, the company she had started at her kitchen table in 1987, had gone into administration in May 2023. The business that had funded a significant part of the Middleton family's rise, the £30 million estimate, the farm building headquarters, the decades of birthday bags, and party supplies dispatched to mothers all over the country, had not survived the particular combination of pressures that ended a great many businesses in those years. It owed money to creditors. The administrator's report made for difficult reading, and the tabloids that had once used the company as proof of Carole's ambition did not particularly dwell on this reversal. It seemed, by 2023, slightly absurd to make a story of Carole Middleton's business troubles when her daughter was the Princess of Wales, her son-in-law was about to be king, and her grandchildren were three of the most photographed children on the planet. She had sold the company, moved on, and remained exactly the person she had always been. The business had been a means. The family had always been the end. What do you do with a story like this? What is the right frame for a life that began in a working-class pocket of West London, moved through the commercial middle classes of Berkshire, and arrive at a position somewhere inside the innermost ring of the British royal family? Not by title, not by blood, but by the sheer accumulative weight of having been the right person consistently over decades. The easy version of this story is the one the tabloids tried to write. The pushy mother, the social climber, the woman who saw a prince and started playing chess. That version has the advantage of being simple and the disadvantage of being wrong. The harder version, the true one, is that Carole Middleton is a woman who built something real from nothing, who raised children who turn out to be extraordinary people, who supported her daughter through a cancer diagnosis with the same undemonstrative ferocity with which she had once distributed party leaflets around Berkshire, and who arrived at old age in possession of the only things that actually endure, a family that loves her, and a character that needs no defense. The guard at the gate spoke up for her once. Everything else, she did herself. There's a line from the royal expert Ingrid Seward that has been quoted in the context of Carole Middleton, and which, if you hold it up to the light, contains the whole story in miniature. Seward said she imagines Carole as a pioneer woman driving a wagon with a rifle at her feet and three children in the back, fighting off any enemy. Basically, she added that is what she has been doing all her life. A pioneer woman, not a social climber, not a woman who married her daughter into royalty. A pioneer, someone who moves in a territory that was not made for people like her, and makes it work through will and labor and a refusal to be turned around. Dorothy Goldsmith, Carole's mother, whom the family called Lady Dorothy because she carried a title in her chest that no one ever officially gave her. Dorothy had wanted better for her family. She had always wanted better. Ronald, her quiet husband, had stripped wallpaper and rehung it when Dorothy decided she didn't like it, because he understood that the wanting was not vanity, but aspiration, and that aspiration is the form love takes when love is channeled into a future rather than a present. Carole inherited that wanting. She took it further than Dorothy could have imagined, and in doing so she fulfilled something that had been moving through the women of her family for generations, quietly and without fanfare, the way the best things always move. On a particular morning, near a particular gate, a guard who had been paying attention spoke up and confirmed that this woman, this Carole Middleton, was expected and belonged. The gate opened. She drove through. She never needed anyone to do that for her again. But she never forgot. One imagines the texture of that pause. The half-second of institutional uncertainty before the system aligned with reality. She had known that pause in 100 forms before that morning, in the slight delay before she was addressed at the right level, in the tabloid column inches that measured her accent, in the names they called her, and the assumptions they made about her intentions. She had lived her whole life in that pause, and come out the other side of it every single time, not intact in the way that means nothing touched her, but intact in the way that matters. Knowing who she was, knowing what she had built, knowing that the gate was not the point. The gate was never the point. The children inside were the point. The daughter she had raised to be steady enough to wear the crown of a future queen. The grandchildren she helped get to school on ordinary mornings. The son-in-law who held her hand while she pulled her heel out of the grass and laughed at herself in the summer sun. The family, whole and real, and hers on the other side of every gate that ever hesitated before letting her through. That is what Carole Middleton built. Not access. Not proximity to power. Not the thing the tabloid spent 30 years insisting she was after. She built a family. She protected it. She fed it literally and otherwise through good years and catastrophic ones, through cancer and controversy and the particular grinding pressure of living a life that a global press apparatus had decided was public property. She built it from a kitchen table in Berkshire with a box of leaflets and an idea about party bags and a belief inherited from Lady Dorothy and passed down to Catherine and George and Charlotte and Louis that wanting better is not the same as being ashamed of where you came from. It is, in fact, the most honest thing a person can be.